we're going to introduce you to Charles. So Charles has a very interesting background, not from the sector, and I think that helps with his perspective, which is going to probably challenge some of us, I think. He brings quite a commercial perspective to managing council facilities. So Charles is an engineer by qualification, and he's also got a master's in business administration. He started his career at Jaguar, and then he moved on to Sainsbury's, so that's quite an interesting shift. But at Sainsbury, of course, he was a project manager and was involved in facilities construction and management. On leaving Sainsbury's, he joined a consulting firm where he was chairman and CEO, leading the buyout and management and restructuring of firms. And then he joined Sport England in 2008. So a very varied background he brought to that role. And at Sport England, he leads the capital project and planning aspects. In his spare time, I don't think there's much of it, he would like to play golf. He's trying to get back into golf this year. He's got 3 children, and he enjoys racing classic cars. So, welcome, Charles. Thank you very much for coming. And it's your turn.
All right.
I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everybody. There's real pressure with a full sort of room here. I'm afraid I sort of wander around because it's a sort of nervous affliction, so hopefully that will be okay. It's been a great week. Met some fantastic people, and the real enthusiasm for sport and developing sport and recreation here is really apparent, and it's great to be there. When Richard asked me to do this gig, it was pop over and let's see what we can do to help the Christchurch guys. And the nearer we got to actually coming, oh, by the way, when you're coming, we just thought you might like to talk to a few people. And I think it's up to 6 now, isn't it? And this, of course, is the highlight, although we are doing a presentation to Sport New Zealand Board tomorrow, which is we're looking forward to enormously, aren't we, Philip? So anyway, so I'll run you through some slides, share some thinking with you, and hopefully some of it will translate into some of the problems and issues you've got. Sarah's done most of this. Only 6 years in sport, so my sort of colleagues groan because I keep talking about customers and consumers and demand and what's the market and all those sorts of things, and they go, no, it's all about supply, it's all about tradition, you know. Sport's been good enough for us for 30 years, we'll just tell these kids what they want and they'll turn up, and of course they don't, so that's part of the challenge that we've got. So Sport England has a varied brief. We're an arm's length body from government. We're funded 75% by the lottery, so the lottery has done an enormous amount for English sport in recent years, and by stealth, government have managed to reduce their investment. So they are now a minority investor in community sport in England, because 75%, as I say, comes from the lottery. We've got a £1 billion budget, and about 40% of that goes to the national governing bodies of sport. We fund 46 of those, as I say. Our main remit is participation, increasing participation and creating a legacy from London 2012 that will endure. And the figures just before Christmas showed that sporting activity is growing on a once-a-week basis, which is the way we measure it, except for football, or soccer in your terms, which is finding it hard to keep those numbers up. And that, of course, when soccer in England has a decline, then all the numbers suffer as a result, because obviously it's a very big contributor to our numbers in that market. So we measure it by playing sport for at least once a week for 30 minutes, and we've got an enormous survey called Active People, where we survey 200,000 people a year, and we break that into market segmentation, and I'll touch on that later because we use that as a tool for a lot of our planning work. We look after the talent pathways. As you know, we've got UK Sport, which fund the elite Olympic athletes, but anything below that we fund with the sports bodies. So if you're looking at cycling, where we've got 600 odd people in the talent pathway, all but 30 of those we will fund through our programme. So we work very hard with the sports to get those talent pathways, but not to compromise participation. So people that don't want to go on the talent pathways, we're just as interested in those people doing sport as they want to do it in the way that they want to do it, rather than it just being used as a means to talent spot and abandon the people that haven't got that talent. So of our £1 billion, 84 million a year of that is spent on that programme, which is a pretty fine investment. And last but not least, the bit that obviously I'm interested in is facilities and planning. So we've got about a quarter of our budget goes into investment into capital programmes across the piece. Some of that directly with the sports. We delegate a small amount of that budget to the sports, but mainly through a series of programmes that are targeting particular investment, and I'll show you some of that later. It's all about outcomes, so we've got particular targets with government, so increasing the number of people with particular focus on youth. This government is particularly interested in that 14 to 25 bracket, and the numbers that came out before Christmas showed a decline in that, which is of great concern to us. Why is it that we're not engaging with that market and increasing their participation where every other sector of the market is moving up? So we're working hard at the moment. We're doing a lot of research to find out why that might be and what we can do about it. And then increasingly, some of the figures we've seen, your male to female ratios are much better than we've got in the UK. So we're working to see how we can increase that. And we've got some targeted programs now to engage the women of the community into sport and try to address those sort of numbers. So we're having to change the way that people engage. So behavioural change sounds all very smart and academic, but clearly traditional sport is not engaging with people. The traditional way of delivery is not working in all markets. So how can we get people to change? How can we get the people that don't participate to change those habits? It's much easier not to participate than it is to get going and break those barriers. So we're working really hard with the academics and the universities and things to look at behavioural change and how we can influence people into the market that we want, and how in a competitive market, because we are in a competitive leisure market with sport, physical activity and recreation, it's much easier to do nothing, and that's probably our biggest challenger. How can we get people to change, and how can we get the organisations to recognise that they need to do something different to engage in this market? Some of the things that we're doing, some of the traditional approaches just don't work. So we're collecting a huge amount of data, and we've recently set up an insights team to do something with that data and to analyse it, see where the market trends are, see where the gaps in the market are, see where we can identify new opportunities, and see where interventions have worked, why they've worked, rather than just copying them. We had a great exercise product called Boxercise, and so all the other sports went, oh, this is really great, so we'll have the version of it as well. And of course they didn't realise that actually they were competing for the same people, and Boxercise had sort of grabbed that market. So the poor guy from squash, when he came to do his presentation for Squashercise, and the board sort of fell apart laughing at him, he sort of felt a bit deflated and sort of went away and thought about it. So we need to get them just not to think like everybody else, but really understand their market and how they can influence change within it. This is rather a complicated slide, but it shows how facilities really do influence right across that agenda. So the bottom of the triangle is all about local neighbourhoods and communities, really driving through core high-performance regional centres right up to the national facilities. And I'm lucky enough to be involved in all of that. So from replacing sort of clubhouses and showers and things at the local pavilions right up to a strong involvement and continued involvement in the Olympic facilities. We're just reopening the velodrome and the aquatic centre next month to the public. So if you ever come across, bring your swimmers in you for £4, so $8 you can go and swim in the Olympic pool, and you can go have a ride around on Wednesdays at the velodrome. So 60% at least of the usage of those facilities post-games will be community programmes. And that will be really inspiring, we hope, for a lot of people. So we've got to make sure that the facility strategy is embedded into that overall strategy. Why are we investing in facilities? What are they going to do to increase participation and to change the behaviour of people away from not participating to participating and participating more? So within that youth market, it's about choice now. It's not about the traditional. We're going to have more products. We're going to have to engage across a wider agenda, and we're going to have to recognise that we're going to have to change things. So the climbing walls now, what's the next gadget or trend or fad that's going to engage that market for the future? So the future facilities are going to have to be flexible, and they're going to have to vary over their life cycle rather than just go, it's a pool, it's a hall, and we'll keep it for the life without altering it. So it's a very dynamic relationship between facilities and all the other programs that we support. So against this background, we've got local authorities that are having cuts from central government of anything between 30 and 50%. So Liverpool, one of our big cities in the northwest, their cut is 56%. And the mayor says, I can't afford to pay for community sport. It's a non-statutory service. All my money's going on health, education, looking after the elderly, those sorts of things. I can't afford to pay for community sports. I'm going to close all the pools. The kids just have to get on with it. So we say, well, actually there's an opportunity here because you're pretty bad at running community sports facilities at the moment anyway. All our benchmarking and quality data shows you right at the bottom of the table. And as I'll show you in a minute, there's plenty of opportunity to improve. And if we go with the journey, then actually we might find that your facilities become subsidy-free and you don't need to pay for it anyway. And they've accepted that challenge. We're both putting in $1 million to look at a feasibility study of how we can turn Liverpool Leisure into a much more cost-effective service. And some of it works, some of it doesn't work, some of it undoubtedly is a challenge, and some of it is about that behavioural change that I spoke about. We've got to change their attitude and the way they deliver things. So we've got to go through a list of options. You know, what are the options against closure? You know, the finance director will look at a big number on a swimming pool and he'll go, right, we'll close that. I'll save myself $500,000 or more a year, close 3 of those, and my budget's looking far healthier. We've got to say to them, what are the alternatives to that? And how, through efficiencies, can we lever the revenue generated by efficiencies to reinvest in facilities that will be much more future-proofed and relevant to the market that we're dealing with? We have to look at the way they operate them. The further north we go, the more it's direct labour. Is that the right way of doing it? And if it is a direct labour contract or whatever, are they as efficient as some of the players that we've got in the market? We've got half a dozen very effective outsourcing organisations now, both as larger not-for-profit trusts like Greenwich Leisure, who are as commercial an organisation as I've ever come across, or the private players like DC and people like that. So there's a competition in the market to operate public facilities now. And the more efficient of those becomes the benchmark for those direct labour teams. So we really need to ensure that those programmings also address the local issues that we're challenged every day, and I've got some slides that will show you that sort of dynamic, how it's a different decision depending on the priorities for that local community. So all of that says, we're saying to them, this is a real opportunity to have another strategic review of your leisure facilities. For a lot of them, they never did it in the first place. A lot of them were politically driven. The local politicians thought there was votes in swimming pools, so I want a swimming pool in my ward or my constituency, whatever. And it was never strategically planned. Or if it was 25 years ago, and things have moved on dramatically in that time. So it's a real opportunity to have a top-down look rather than just a bottom-up, reactive look to say we need closures to produce savings. So we're challenging the market to say, you can save at least 30% of capital and revenue. That will maintain the growth in participation because that funds more up-to-date facilities and better programs, and that will have greater impact on an output of those local outcomes. I was astounded when I started dealing with this sector, how conned we were being by some of the people in the market. The sort of premium we seem to pay for sport compared to what I'd known in sort of commercial and retail, I don't think is ever justified. So I've brought in a series of contractors that I used to work with in retail, and lo and behold, they're picking up all the work and actually making some profit, because we were real sort of bastards in retail, used to screw them into the ground to get the volume. And now, of course, they can come and pick and choose. So we're finding that they're really challenging the establishment in the market, and some of the players are now not getting a look at some of the recent contracts as a result of that. And lo and behold, the prices are coming down, and it's we're really starting to challenge. And we'll come on to part of it being efficient design as well, and I'll show you how we're sort of challenging not only the procurement of it, but the design as well. But we are achieving those 30% reductions in capital costs. We're more than achieving the 30% in revenue with the top players, and I'll show you some of the stats on that in a second. And that does maintain that growth in participation. This is a complicated slide, but we run the national benchmarking service with Sheffield Hallam University. And we split the results into 4 quarters. And what we see is the best quarter, the top quartile, outperforms the bottom quartile by 41%. And this is like for like leisure centres. It's not comparing a 2011 centre with the 1970s. These are like for like, wet and dry, same demographics, so they really are a direct comparison. So you can see where those efficiencies produce results. 41% on average, that's in our terms 410,000. It's a bit more actually, it's gone up to 430 now. So that's $860,000 a year more revenue coming through an efficiently run centre. That's the difference between a very substantial subsidy and running at surplus. That's the difference between being able to lever the investment, pay back the capital requirements of funding a new centre, for instance. So it can be done. None of this is theory. These are based upon facts and measurement that we do on performing leisure centres throughout the country. So that gives you real hope that driving efficiency can produce the sort of return on investment that we need to sustain participation and community leisure for the future. So we need to help with this. We need to take this national leadership. We need to be that top-down body. And one of the things that the new leadership within Sport England has done is taken a bit more of an overt role in it. Sport England used to be a little bit sort of reluctant to get involved in it. And we've said, no, sod that. We really need to take the leadership, because if we don't, who is going to do that? So we need to take the initiative, we need to be challenged, we need to challenge the market. And we might well get it wrong occasionally, and it's obviously difficult sometimes to engage with these people, but it's certainly those results are worth that sort of effort. So we need to create the support tools and the guidance and everything to challenge the market to change. And we need then to have the funding to support that effort. So things like our Strategic Facilities Fund, which I'll show you some examples of, where we're looking to fund that community sports hub, that co-located model within that community. But the challenge to those people is to say, how do we know that this is the right facility to fund? Unless you've done the strategic planning, unless you've done the modelling and the rest of it, how do I know that's the right facility, the right blend of facilities in the right location to invest public money? Now, and that's really where people are challenged on it. And if they don't want to do the work, that's absolutely fine. Just don't come to me for any money. You've got to go and stand on your own 2 feet. And if it goes bust, or if you're down the bottom of the quartiles with the National Benchmarking Service, well, you know, you've got to justify that sort of decision. So we're really trying to help the sector. We're trying to lower those financial costs. We're trying to create for them financially sustainable business models. And as you'll see in a minute, we've given them all the models. We've given every assistance that we can to challenge the market to change that. And then we've got to also sell sport as a intervention on the wider agendas. The core cities in England say to us, it's not about sport, it's about social cohesion, it's about health, it's about economic growth. So we're working hard to do the research to show that we are a cost-effective intervention in all those markets. Sport, physical activity, recreation is by far the most effective intervention in the health market for diabetes and obesity and so forth. We're running a series of pilots called Neighbourhood Life, where we measure people from a medical point of view, and we have a very organised training regime, and we're finding people coming off diabetes treatment drugs for the first time in their life as a result of that activity. So we've got to ensure that everything we do enhances that value for money for the sector. Success is a sort of bold role, but we think if we can do this, we will increase participation, we will create that legacy from London 2012, and we will deliver against those wider local outcomes. So we'll touch a number of agendas. It's not just sport for sport's sake, it's sport within that wider agenda, and we believe that the success that we're having gives us a lot of opportunity and hope for the future. So on the economic benefit, again a complicated slide, but what this basically shows you is that in England, sport was a very substantial contributor to the market. 15th, I think, in the sectors, contributing £20 billion, 1.9% of the GVA within the country. So closing sport, denying sport, saying to Liverpool, I'm not going to invest in it, is a very short-sighted thing to do, because you will lose the opportunity of being part of that market. So the wider halo effect of that sport is substantial, 2.3% of all the jobs in England within our sector. But the Mayor didn't understand that, so we need to publicise that. We need to give him one of our shiny leaflets that shows all that I've got a few copies of, and we need to have the research that brings that to his attention, because if he doesn't know about it, then he will make an ill-informed decision that we all will regret. So of that, grassroots is close on £12 billion, part of that, and 8.5 comes from the sort of incidental parts of that. So we're the majority of that investment number. And on the health benefits, we've made sure that we style our research and our findings in the way that medical community will want to see it, which is quality equivalence. It's all about your adjusted life year, how long you're going to live as a result of it. And what we've done here, we've branded sport as a drug, and it's called Fitrix. And you sit down with the doctors' communities and you say, we've got this wonder drug, it's called Fitrix. So it's £440 compared to statins at 17,000. They go, this is brilliant, where do I get it? What drug company produces this? And we go, actually it's physical activity. And they all go, oh. Well, no, physical activity doesn't work, you know. And you say, well, absolutely it does. And of course, this is where you are considerably ahead of us. So we want to learn from you. But it's very important. Those figures are absolutely outstanding that really make the argument for it. 68 patients for one intervention of costing 30,000 quid. So we're 68 times as efficient as some of the drugs out there. So with all of this, what are the solutions? Well, we need to start with an efficiency process. And you know, I know a lot of people like me say that here's a process that we thought of earlier, but you've got to start somewhere. We've really sort of got to challenge what the current delivery is. So we've got to see what their operational arrangements are, and you've got to benchmark, because otherwise, what do you know? How do you know what improvement looks like? How do you know what improvement you've made unless you benchmark what you're doing? And of course, you have to stand up to the results, because if you're in that fourth quarter of MBS, that's a little bit embarrassing, but you've got to get through that to say, right, well, we need to do that. So we need a strategic approach which says, what's the needs and evidence of your local community for the investment that we're about to make in this facility? So rather than a supply focus, what is the demand that I'm trying to lever with this investment in these facilities in this sort of place? And we've got to have the cost-effective solution to that. So when people come to me, I say, I don't want to see plans, I want to see your business plan. I want to see how you're going to pay for this investment that you're asking me to put some money into. How are you going to pay for the revenue for 25 years, which is our condition of grant for some of our bigger numbers? So go and do that number. Don't start drawing plans until you've done that. And then that will start to show you what you should design. And we've had far too many people that come. I've spent, with compliments to our architects amongst here, I spent £150,000, $300,000 on this shiny example of this beautiful leisure centre. And we go, oh, that's really interesting design. Where's the business plan? Oh, well, we're working on that. So they're back engineering a solution because they want the shiny design. And we've said to them, just go away and just do the business plan, and then we'll start to look at it. So we need to break that sort of cycle. And if we do that, what we're finding is that there's a lot of investors out there, is that me or you, that are very interested in coming into our market. We're talking to pension funds that want to invest $2 billion a year in the UK market, but they haven't had the confidence because it's fragmented and every local authority and council are doing their own thing, and they haven't had the confidence of the business plans before to say, will somebody be able to pay the rent if I invest in this leisure centre? But this way, actually, I can see there's a return here. I can see there's some business acumen finally coming into this market. I'll give them the money to pay for it. So we've developed a whole series of tools to support this journey through efficiency. The facility planning model tool, which works with our active places database, which is a database of every facility in the country, what it's got when it's open, all that sort of thing. Some build solutions called affordable models, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. And then the procurement toolkit as well, because we've seen far too many people go down the wrong route on procurement, both of the operating contract and of the building itself, and making the lawyers very rich, writing sort of bespoke contracts and so forth. So we've said, no, we'll do all that for you, and we'll make it outcome focused. So it's starting to drive those local requirements and the participation targets that we want, rather than output focused. So with this efficiency journey, you start with those facts. You do your demand modelling, you do your supply modelling, and it will come up with a solution, which will say you need to build a facility of this sort in that location, in your town, and it will produce the results. And of course that's very rarely the case, because that ideal site probably doesn't exist. It's probably not council owned. If it's in a developer's hands, he'll want a premium for it. So you then have to put the sensitivities to it. So what are we going to do with elite? What are we going to do with competition? What if we've actually got a site that is available that's half a mile down the road from where we're looking at, and we can put all those sensitivities into it. And we do that as that sort of second step of our facilities planning model. And the bottom right-hand one is really important, planning across boundaries. We've done a lot of guidance on that because a lot in England, a lot of the councils think there's a 10-foot high brick wall between them and next door. So they plan without sort of peering over the fence to see what facilities are available. And Sport England have been guilty of funding projects that displace market share from something we funded 2 or 3 miles down the road, 5 years earlier. So we need to think much more holistically than we have done in the past. And we need to join up all the facilities that are in the area. There's been a lot of talk since we've been here about school access and school facilities and various relationships, and we have those same challenges in England, particularly now as it's moving to a sort of self-governing academy model. And And so we're dealing with individual governors rather than with the local authority education department now. And a lot of them are saying, I don't mind you using my facilities, but sport's a nightmare to deal with. You're so fragmented and lots of different organisations, and I haven't got time for that. So we're putting in a satellite club to manage the facilities in a school as part of this overall environment. So we say to the school, don't you worry, if you give us access, we'll manage the demand, and you only need to talk to one sporting body with this satellite club. And lo and behold, they go, oh, that's all right, that works pretty well. And we're gaining access to those facility out of school hours. And for a lot of activity, a small club that doesn't want to grow, doesn't want to be part of that sort of different sort of environment within a leisure centre, the school is the ideal location for them. So they can plonk along and play their badminton in an evening. That clears them out of the leisure centre where we can drive some real revenue activities, coaching sessions, back to badminton, all those sorts of sessions that we have, midnight basketball. And that gives us that opportunity to drive that revenue through the leisure centre. So this is the outcome of one of our facilities planning models. The redder it is, the more under-provided, and the bluer, greener it is, the better provided it is. So we did this because obviously Richard spends some considerable time in Southwark, and obviously was very effective because you see it's all under-provided for. So he did a cracking job there. But so if you're going to put your pool, you don't put it in the red bit. Or you do put it in the red bit, sorry. I've been doing this too long. But if you put it in the blue bit, you're already putting it into a market that is well provided for. So we can plot the existing facilities against the demographics of any area. Interestingly, we did it for Christchurch earlier in the week, and there's a lot of caveats on it because obviously we're using England market segmentation with New Zealand demographics, but you know it probably works well enough to illustrate what the alternatives are for Christchurch. So it was an interesting opportunity to do that. And we're saying we'll make this model available to anybody that wants it. It really sort of does drive that thinking. It gives you that objective base case to argue that you've got the right facilities in the right place, achieving that sort of demand. And on that fragmented market, I was amazed when we put this slide together. I thought 80% of our facilities would sit within local authority council ownership, but you see it's very different from that. 3/4 of the sports halls are in education, for instance. This pool split, roughly equally between education, local authorities and private. So it very much is a mixed economy. You very much have to engage right across the community asset owners if you're going to make sure that this succeeds. So it is a lot of complicated conversations with a lot of people, but again it's based upon objective evidence, not sort of hearsay and like and traditional supply-based thinking. And of course we recognise that everybody has a different sort of set of pressures. So when we're talking cuts, there's a different dynamic between whether it's commercial performance, community engagement or customer service, and every council that we talk with has that different sort of dynamic. Their dot is in a different position. Some of them will just say, drive the hell out of the programming, maximise, put the price up, maximise the return and pay for it that way. Others will say, no, I've got a lot of social cohesion issues. I need to have those kids off the streets in my leisure centres to keep my policing bill down of a weekend. So that dynamic has to be taken into account. But we say to that, have that dynamic, but against a properly designed business model. Maximise the commercial part of the model and then put your sensitivities into it. And what we also say is use best practice and narrow your sort of choice. What I've said earlier this week is, if you're going buying the mayor's car, you don't phone up Dunlop to buy some tyres and some guy to build a gearbox and somebody to put an engine and build yourself a prototype. What you do is you go down to the Audi garage and you say, I've got this amount of money to spend and this is the function. It's a 2-door coupe because it's only the mayor and his wife that we're taking around, or it's a 7-seater utility vehicle because he's going to bring half the cabinet with him. So you do that choice, and yet we don't apply any of that choice to buildings. We build prototypes, and what we should be building is production models. We should be going to a building and saying, how does it work for you? How can I improve upon that design without having to redesign every nut and bolt of it? And we do this through a journey, so a number of strategic steps. And it's so demoralizing when so many people come to me and the first conversation we have is at step 5. And we say to them, well, you know, where's your supply and demand modelling and everything else? Oh yes, we're going to do that. So our guys now, our regional staff, take this with us. We've got a sort of coloured version of this, and every initial meeting they have, they plot where it is on this sort of efficiency process. And it's amazing how very few of them are actually starting at the beginning. So what we have to do then is take them back to the beginning and say, right, let's go through this process properly, and then we'll come out with the right decision. So our challenge to the Audi brochure is our affordable sports hall models. And what we've done is we've deliberately been provocative here, because people say it's a nonsense, your 30% savings, it can't be achieved. So we said, okay, we'll go out and we'll model it, and we'll base it upon what best practice is out there, those top quarters of that MBS survey. And we'll produce some really good guidance that you can then, it's the basis of your business case. You can change the front cover and you can take it to the cabinet and make your investment decision. You can use it as your employer's requirements when you go out to market. You can use it as your design brief when you're appointing your consultant team and your architects, and you can use it as the basis when you go out to procurement for your operating contract and for your construction contract. So it's got all the information there, and all those are based upon the outcomes as well. So those contract parts of it are based upon driving participation to achieve those wider agenda items like obesity and diabetes and so forth. And these are the numbers that we're producing. So we've got a range of them. An option 5, you see, which is probably the most relevant to a lot of what you're doing. An 8-lane pool, 5-court hall. This is badminton court, so it's sort of 1.5 of your courts. 100-station health and fitness gym. Can't do the maths. $15 million. So from what we've heard so far this week, that's quite competitive in your market. Everyone will say, oh, that's madness, you can't do that. Gosport just opened, didn't quite achieve it, 7.8 million at Gosport with all those facilities because there was some ground condition problems, so we had to do a bit more piling than we would want to. So we know we can achieve it. And if it's 10 million, it's a lot less. You know, people used to come to me with a 25-metre pool, and they used to vary between 50 and 20 million pounds. And we just used to laugh at them and just sort of say, you know, where did you get this? Well, the quantity surveyor's done me an estimate, and we've done a design and all the rest of it. So part of that model is about that efficiency programming. So you've got to make sure that as part of that model, you're driving that revenue. That's going into the business plan to be able to pay for it. So what we're saying is maximise that efficiency and then put in your your programs like your disabled swimming group or your Friday night free session for the youth and everything. Because if you do it that way, you've got an actual price for that intervention. So if I put my disabled swimming group in on Sunday morning, that's going to cost £50,000 a year out of the programmed revenue. If I move it to the afternoon, actually it's only going to cost me £10,000. And then put all of that knowledge into the right combination of facilities to suit the demand that you've got locally. And this is our sort of typical guidance. So you've got the entrance and the cafe. So the cafe is outside the security line, so encourages all the parents to get in there and have their trendy coffee rather than sitting in the car park while the kids are swimming or playing in the court. You've got views all the way through in every activity, so people will sit there and see the activity. So instead of activity being hidden behind long corridors that cost you money to build but don't generate any revenue, it's all minimised. There's very little corridor space in that building. So we've maximised the net to gross efficiencies of it. We've really shrunk down to the minimum the non-revenue generating parts of that building. And that's how it gets down to being 7.5 million rather than 12 or 15. Part of it is the efficiency of the design as well as the efficiency of the revenue generating business model. So we're very happy to give you all of these. We're sort of promoting these. Gosport was the third generation of one of the case studies that I'll show you in a minute. And we've worked really hard with the leisure operators to do this, because what we've said to them, if you share best practice with us, we create a growth in the market that will give you a very big return, because you'll be going out after a lot more market share than you've got at the moment. And DC Leisure, that I mentioned earlier, have doubled their marketing force in recent weeks as a result of this initiative. They see the real opportunity to go out there and grab some big market share. And then we've done the procurement guidance, so we've taken them through all the lessons of what Sport England have done wrong, what other people have done wrong, what the market says. Again, the operators are saying to us, we can't afford to bid for some of the lengthy competitive dialogue type procurements because it's too much money over too long a time for the return I get. So we've shortened and streamlined the whole sort of procurement aspects, and we've given them templates and we've given them KPIs. So we've given them the whole package. And again, the only people that don't like this are the rather rich lawyers in London who we see as it's rather offensive. But as we use the best and the slickest of them to do it, actually they're sort of coming around to our way of thinking. So then we start to put the funding in. When you've been through this process, now you're bringing me something that I'm really keen to invest in. And we've got a series of programs that address different parts of the market. So our iconic is about that strategic, co-located sports hub within the community. Multi-sport, multi-discipline. Ideally, you've got education, you've got the library, you've got the community services, you've got health, and you've got sport on that market. And the health, you rent the space out to them, and that becomes a pre-let that is generating revenue into your business model on that leisure centre. So don't take their capital, which is what most of them want to do, because you can lever their revenue, their rent revenue, far more effectively in the market than you can use their capital. So you use that pre-let to go and get your borrowing on the basis of it. Underneath that, we've got the improvement fund that is looking at artificial pitches. It's looking at extending sports halls. We've just done a programme where we've gone round and updated changing facilities in pools, because the customers say to us the thing that puts them off most is the dirty changing, the lack of family changing and everything. So again, we've done a series of interventions that measure like for like. Some of them we haven't invested in, the equivalent we have, and the early indications are showing that it increases throughput by about 20%, decent changing rooms. Now if that works, I won't need to invest in changing rooms anymore, because I've done a proof of concept that shows the market that you get a very good return on investment by putting money into your changing room facilities. So part of this investment is actually promoting the market to the point where I won't need to invest in the future, because they'll be able to get that money very readily from either the operators themselves or the market at a competitive rate. And then I can use public funds to generate the system that helps them to achieve that. Inspired is probably our most effective investment for a long time. It's about £50,000 awards to local communities, really down to the grassroots. So I think we're keeping most of the plumbers and the roofers locally in business at the moment. We've done 1,500 grants. It's gone up since I did this slide now. And the other thing that it really does well is engage with local politicians, because the MPs and the local councillors love to come out and hand those big cheques to the local population and smile sweetly for the local paper. So it helps us right at the grassroots to really sustain and generate activity right down at the basics, and also helps us to play the political game that sees sport in the headlines with the politicians on a very regular basis. So it's been a very effective solution. And the last two, education facilities, it's helping to promote that access, so we're paying for the doors that you need to segregate the community from the kids and those sorts of things. We're extending sports hall where there's a strategic need to it. And playing fields is really protecting, we've got 60,000 pitches in 20,000 sites in England, and it's about protecting those, draining them properly, promoting them. And since I've been here, my emails have gone off the Richter scale with about flooding and all the rest of it. So I think we're going to have to put a few more pounds into the protecting playing fields when I get back and work on an intervention, and we'll use some of Philip's ideals, which he'll be telling you about later. So this is about how that adds up to that 265 million across a whole series of interventions designed around helping to make the whole system more efficient. The other 40 million that's gone is where we're putting it directly through the sports whole sport plan, so the sports themselves are investing that on particular projects that they think are cost effective for the solution. I just finished with a few of the case studies. So this is Godalming Pool, southwest of London. We built it in the car park of the old pool, and as you can see, it's quite a nice design. Again, very repeatable. That's not offensive to anybody. You could build that anywhere in the country. The roof's nice and low, so it's very effective from the heat point of view and all the rest of it. But this is not just an aquatic centre. We don't build aquatic centres on their own. This has got a gym, it's got a cafe, it's got dance studios. It's all helping to generate income for that site. So it cost under £5 million, so $10 million. And as you can see, it's quadrupled the throughput of the old pool. So you build the right facilities in the right place, and the people will come and they'll generate enough money, so this now runs at a surplus. So it actually is putting investment back into other activities within that community. Elmbridge is the first of this probably is what inspired those affordable models. It's open 6 years now, and we've used it. We've used the design at Rotherham, and now we've used it at Gosport. So it's driven the sort of third generation of that affordable model design, and we've squeezed and made it slightly more efficient. But if you ever you're ever in England and you want to go and see the Ideal Leisure Centre, go and see Excel. It's Walton-on-Thames, so just south of London. It's an absolutely brilliant centre, and because it's properly specified, it looks as good as new now, 6 years after it was opened. Again, the numbers are stunning. It's gone over 1 million now, rather than 2010 when we first started showing these slides. The fitness membership's gone up to 4,000 now, and you can see all the other activities just going through the roof. We closed 2 different centres, brought them all onto one site, and this is the result of it. So, for us, the financial challenges in England are a real opportunity to really influence this market. You can't paper over a 50% cut by closing an hour early and turning the pool temperature down a bit. You've got to do something radical. If it's going to be closure, then that's really going to impact on a lot of us, and the costs of closure are going to impact on some of their core statutory services like health and like social inclusion and all the rest of it. So you do that at your peril. So we've got to work at an alternative. The alternative is this demand-focused, efficiency-led, driving revenue solution. And none of it's theory, it's all based upon best practices that hopefully you've seen from those case studies. People out there in England are doing exactly what I'm saying, and as a result of that, they're safeguarding and growing their participation and their sport for the future because they're doing it as efficiently as any other sector would do. They're working like retailers, they're focusing on their consumers and their customers, they're seeing market opportunities, and they're exploiting the dynamics within the market. So they're using that behavioural change to really keep ahead of the market and protect and influence the opportunity for the future. So it is achievable. It just has to be a different mindset. We've all got to work together within a mixed economy to achieve it. And it takes leadership from the Sport New Zealand, the Sport England, to stand up here and go, we've actually got a solution, and to work with quite a fragmented and disparate industry to bring it together on a sort of common agenda. And that's what we're trying to do. So thank you very much indeed, and hopefully you found that of interest.